You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And hey, welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And on today's episode, we have an author chat with Malia Maunakea about her latest middle grade novel, Lei and the Invisible Island, the second book of her Lei duology.
Yes, so Lei and the Invisible Island is the second book in this duology. It picks up right after Lei and the Fire Goddess, so I recommend people read that one first. But if you have not, that's okay. We have no spoilers in this episode, thankfully. So
yeah, as always, the Books and Boba podcast is supported in part by our listeners over on Patreon. So if you'd like to become a bigger part of our book club, head on over to patreon.com/booksandboba and become an official member. Our Patreon supporters gain access to not only our members-only Discord server, where you can talk to us and fellow club members in real time, but also our monthly bonus podcast, Boba Chats. So definitely thank you to everyone who supported us so far. And yeah, with that out of the way, please enjoy our conversation with Malia Maunakea.
And we are here with Malia Maunakea, who is a native Hawaiian writer who grew up on Hawaii and Oahu before relocating to the continent for college. She writes both middle grade fiction and nonfiction and is the author of Lei and the Fire Goddess and most recently Lei and the Invisible Island, which is coming out on June 4th. Welcome to the show, Malia.
Thanks so much for having me.
So according to your bio, it says that you are living in Colorado now, but you used to live in the rainforest near a volcano, and that's an experience that most people can't say they had. So I'm just curious as to what was it like living there, and how is your Hawaii different from the Hawaii that tourists see?
I was growing up in Volcano from the time I was born till only about 4 or 5. But we would go back to visit a lot. And it really was so different feeling than anywhere else I've been. It just stayed with me. Like, I feel like those first few years are really formative, and you sure don't have a lot to do when you're out there in the rainforest other than climbing on the trees and playing on the lava rock and that sort of stuff. So I think it left its mark and is so vastly different than going to Waikiki or even to Kauai or Maui or the other islands where that are more popular tourist destinations. I wanted to be able to explore that a little bit more and be a little bit more authentic to the Hawaii that I grew up with when writing.
Yeah, definitely a more glamorous version versus, quote unquote, roughing it out in in a rainforest. So you wrote nonfiction before switching to fiction. Your first book was Lightweight Backpacking for Families. And I can definitely see your background in like nature coming through here. Can you just tell us about your journey to publication and how was it jumping from nonfiction to fiction?
It was kind of wild because they both sort of happened at the same time. I decided to submit the idea for the nonfiction story, Backpacking with Children, in January. And when you submit or go on sub with nonfiction, you basically write the first however many chapters plus a really good index or table of contents of what you think the rest of the book could be. And then you wait to see if they like the idea. And if they like the idea, then you actually write the rest of the book. With fiction, it's the other way around, at least when you're getting started, and you have to have the whole book complete before you start to query. So I wrote the first few chapters of nonfiction based on what I knew and what I had experienced already in our family's backpacking adventures, and put that out on sub, and didn't hear back until May. And that was a long time for someone with ADHD to just sit around and wait. So then I started writing a few different things, which eventually led to fiction middle grade. First, I started with chapter books and got rejected left and right, like 70 rejections on chapter books. So then I tried middle grade, and I started writing lay in April when I still didn't know if the nonfiction was going to go anywhere yet. So started writing lay in April, heard back in May that the backpacking book was going to go somewhere, started writing both of them concurrently, being able to do the research and the digging up, because it turns out some of the chapters they wanted me to write were things that I'm not as familiar with, like first aid and safety, where I am definitely not a professional. So that required a bunch of research. And I was able to bounce between heavy book report writing feeling in nonfiction with fun imagination stuff in fiction. So it was really great and really hard at the same time, trying to do both books together. I think the backpacking one came out in February, and the lay came out in June of the same year. So they really were a process together.
Yeah, publication is a weird process. I mean, it's slow, but also fast at the same time. It kind of feels like hurry up and wait, which
Completely.
is kind of like the same thing in film and TV.
I mean, I can't even imagine writing one book at a time, like juggling two different books. It's, man.
It was a good exercise for the brain to like shift gears and have a break here and go full throttle there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's the same for a lot of writers who, work day jobs that have nothing to do with creativity, and then they switch over to writing, and it's like, yeah, that's like doing two things at once.
I mean, I kind of feel like
Yes.
they're thinking about their book while they're at their day job anyways, right?
Yeah.
Completely.
I just thought it was interesting that you started with chapter book writing, because I feel like not a lot of writers jump into that subgenre. Even with middle grade, I feel like most middle grade writers, they've tried with YA, but the voice is too young, so they shift to middle grade. And middle grade, I feel like that reader base is so passionate, and there's definitely like a thirst for stories with characters of that age. But it has been kind of difficult to get books in that age group to be like super popular, other than Rick Riordan and Percy
Yes.
Jackson. So
Yes.
so my question is like, what compelled you to write for younger readers?
Well, I do not have a background in writing at all. I went to college for civil engineering and
Oh, wow.
have a minor in business, and was a transportation planner and worked at a law firm, and then was in real estate for many, many years. But in seeing a friend of mine write a how-to backpacking book, and then seeing another acquaintance write best hikes with children, I kind of combined their ideas and did backpacking with children for that piece. And then that was the only thing I thought I knew enough about to write a nonfiction about. So when I was waiting and wanted to explore fiction, I started as small and short as possible, because I didn't
Very
think I could
wise.
write very long. And I looked at the Jack and Annie Magic Treehouse books, because my kids were huge fans, and they were very formulaic, which appealed to an engineer like me, because there was a pattern and there was logic. And I was like, okay, in chapter 1, this is what you do. In chapter 2, this is what you do. In chapter 3. So I just used those books and studied them and tried to create my own chapter books based on exactly what the Magic Treehouse books wrote. But then they failed big time. So I researched, again, that engineering piece comes in handy, because I dug into why they were failing. And what I could find was that chapter books are really hard to sell as a debut author. Heaven forbid it be my writing. No, no, no. It's just that those are hard things to sell. But it looked like middle grade or YA or picture books were a little easier, so-called. I know middle grade is having a moment right now. So I was like, okay, I wrote about 10,000 words. It says here middle grade is 40,000 words. My kid is madly obsessed with Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson, all the Greek mythology. We have our own mythologies and legends. What if I do exactly find that pattern, find that algorithm to write a book just like that before Hawaii? So I went and talked to the librarians because they're brilliant and asked if anybody had done that for Hawaii before. And they said, no, but there's Rick Riordan Presents and he does stuff from every single culture. You should check them out. I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I was thinking. Yes. So then I studied those books the way I had studied the Treehouse books and started writing it kind of that way because that's what my son was into.
Yeah. I love that you're a transport planner because in the past, like I also worked in transportation consulting. So definitely relate there. And, you know, I mean, I see on your wall, our listeners can't see this, but you have like a little, it looks like one of those string graphs. It looks like you're plotting out something.
Yes, I was, that was Alan Gratz actually taught me how to plot out the 8 beats of a novel and help me get lay up on the wall. And now I kind of use that for all of my attempting at plotting, but I usually get distracted before I get to the end. So it's never fully formed before I'm like, okay, that's good enough. I just got to start writing.
I get that. I have notebooks full of like half-formed plans of like things to do.
Yes, it's a struggle for sure.
So like Lay and the Fire Goddess, that was like the first book in the series. And it kind of focuses on the volcano goddess, Pele. For our listeners out there who have not read the first book, can you just give us like a quick summary of it and what to kind of expect in the second book so we can like be a little bit caught up?
Sure. So in the first book, trying to keep spoilers to a minimum, Lay is going by the name Anna because she doesn't really embrace her Hawaiian side yet. She's growing up in Colorado, but goes back to Hawaii for 3 weeks every summer to stay with her tutu, her grandma, who tells her the mo'olelo, the history and stories about who she is, who their family are, and wants her to kind of be the keeper of the genealogy and the stories. Lay doesn't believe it, or Anna doesn't believe it. She pushes back. She and Tutu get into a big fight. She tries to convince her best friend in Hawaii to be on her side rather than Tutu's side, even though her bestie kind of sides with Tutu because he grows up there and believes everything and thinks she should listen to her grandma. She tries to defy the goddess by doing something that upsets the goddess that her tutu told her not to do. And a giant hawk captures her best friend, and now she has to go rescue him because she knows that was her fault. And now the fire goddess might kill him, burn down their home, destroy their village, the whole thing. So it's kind of a big race against time to get up to the fire goddess and apologize profusely and hope that she accepts and doesn't kill them all. And then in doing that, so that's kind of book 1.
And you kind of leave them on a cliffhanger. So
yeah. Well, her bestie ends up losing something that's super important to him. And without that thing, he begins to rot. So all of book 2 is trying to get that thing back so he doesn't turn into a horrible person.
The stakes are pretty high for like a 3-week vacation, I'm going to say.
It's an exhausting vacation. This is not your typical Hawaii sit on the beach with a fruity umbrella drink kind of vacation. Yeah, she's busy the whole time.
Yeah. So, the story of Lei is kind of the opposite of your journey, right? She goes from Colorado to Hawaii and kind of reconnects with her roots and discovers, that those are important to her. How did you come up with the character?
It's funny because even though she seems on the surface the opposite of me, a lot of it came from me because in 7th grade, I got into this school, Kamehameha, on Oahu, and I was from Hawaii Island. And Kamehameha Schools is a school for Hawaiians. You have to be Hawaiian to go there. And I did not feel Hawaiian enough to really fit in or belong. So a lot of Anna's insecurities and just inner yucky feelings and thoughts came from my own sense of who am I? Where do I fit in? Do I really belong here? I don't eat the same things that my friends do. I don't listen to the same things my friends do. Is that okay? Am I Hawaiian enough? And I can remember dealing with straddling the lines. My mom is from New York and is pure Polish. And I mean, she did most of the cooking and she did a lot of that. So we didn't have traditional Hawaiian food necessarily all the time. Sorry, Mom. But also I see my kids now being raised in Colorado and having those similar, like, well, we're not really Hawaiian. I'm like, actually, you are. And you are enough. And even if it's not having anything to do with Hawaiian, if you're just in school struggling with believing you belong in a space, I think that's something a lot of folks can identify with.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely identified with just the diaspora struggles, right? I feel the same way. My parents are from Taiwan, but really from China, and there's a whole, Civil War thing that happened. So we're displaced like 2-3 times over. So there's definitely that sense of what am I actually, especially, living as minorities in America, also constantly telling you that maybe you don't exactly belong all the time.
Yup. And now there's more than half of the Hawaiians don't live in Hawaii. There more than 50% of Hawaiians live outside of the islands. So I thought a book like this, kind of shining the light on figuring out who you are, connecting to your roots, was really timely because of that.
Well, writing a book about connecting to your roots, I'm just curious as to has it helped you connect to your roots as a writer? Because I'm looking at your bio and it says that you are currently pursuing a degree in Hawaiian studies. And I'm curious as to what made you want to go back to school and study that, and how has it been going back to your roots and learning about your culture?
I actually need to update my bio because I graduated on Friday.
Oh, congratulations.
Yay. It's been such a fascinating journey because I don't think I would have been brave enough to go into Hawaiian studies if I was still at home, if I was still in Hawaii, because there's in my head, and this is all perception, right? In my head, you had to be a certain kind of Hawaiian to go into Hawaiian studies. You had to have immaculate pronunciation of the olelo, of the language, and you had to be dancing hula since the time you were 3 and just have big glorious hula hair. And I had this built up image of the type of people who get that degree. But being separate from that and being older, I care less about what other people think, and I'm interested in it. And if I don't do it, then what? I'm just not going to because I'm worried? No, I'm far away. I'm going to try it. And the amazing thing is that with this program that Windward Community College created, it is all online and majority was asynchronous. So it was a whole bunch of diaspora for the most part, trying to learn this stuff that we never got to do. And I ended up being one of a minority that was actually raised in Hawaii. So I was like more Hawaiian, if you will, than other folks that were raised on the mainland or on the continent. And that was such a mind trip to see. And yet we all came together and like discovered who we are together and got reconnected to our roots together. And there were some folks in the program that weren't Hawaiian by blood at all, but it was so nice to have folks interested in it. And I think that a lot of us were older. It was a second degree for probably most of us in the program. And we were there because we were genuinely interested, not for a career path necessarily. It was just wanting the knowledge. And that was really different than going to school for engineering at 18.
Yeah, I mean, that's the painful part of being part of the diaspora. Like, language is such a big part of our culture and our history, but with each generation, we kind of lose a part of that. I mean, of course, we also gain like new cultures because we're bringing like our Americanness or our Canadianness into the mix. But yeah, like it's so lovely that you had this community where you guys are all like trying to get back in touch with your language, which, you know, wasn't really accessible to you at the time. I'm also curious about like your knowledge in Hawaiian mythology. Like, did you grow up hearing a lot of the folktales and legends, or was it kind of like you weren't as familiar with it until you went into your studies?
So I want to first be clear because I know I use the word mythology in a lot of my descriptions because it's the easiest way for us to find a place on bookshelves where to put these stories. In Hawaii, they aren't myths. They're more legends and, like you say, folk tales, because these gods and goddesses and kupua, the demigods, are all people's relatives and ancestors. So I try to be really careful in going forward, trying to make sure I stress that the line between fact and fiction is very, very blurred in Hawaii and non-existent in certain instances. So the mo'olelo that I learned, the stories and history that I learned, had to do with people's ancestors and kupuna. So Pele and Poliahu are sisters. And kind of like, I really loved the movie Big Fish way back in the day with Ewan McGregor or somebody. I can't even remember.
I think it was Ewan,
but the stories were true, but they just felt larger than life and they got blown so big. I think that's what a lot of these stories come from, just people doing extraordinary things that their descendants end up making them even bigger and grander in real life. That was in a segue. Where I started hearing about these things is pretty much everywhere. So in 4th grade, my teacher, Mr. Ko'ochi, told us a story about Pele and Poliahu racing holua sleds down Maunakea. And that was the first time I had heard of Poliahu, the snow goddess of Maunakea, which blew my mind because my last name is Maunakea and I never knew we had a goddess on Maunakea. The other gods, like Pele, I lived in Volcano. Everybody knows Pele. Like you just do. It's just fact. It's accepted. As much as people know other beliefs, you know Pele if you live, especially living in Volcano. There are paintings of her at Volcano Visitor Center and in museums, and those shaped my childhood very much. So she was always present with me, and you didn't ever want to disrespect her. So that really filled me with kind of a reverence and awe, and I wanted to put that into a story about, but make it like middle school fun and friendly. Yeah.
like, thank you for pointing out that the line between fact and fiction is very thin in Hawaii, because mythology, yeah, like when we think of mythology, we think of like Greek mythology, and we're like, oh, that's not something that, current day people really believe in. They don't really practice the religion there anymore. So, yeah, I thought that was like really interesting. How much actual research did you have to do for the writing process? Because like knowing the folktales and legends is one thing, but kind of adapting it to like a modern day adventure, that's another thing entirely.
This is so fun because this is exactly what I talk about in all of my school visits. So I'm like, oh, I am prepared for these questions. Yes, I did a lot of research when writing Lay and the Fire Goddess. So I start with the imagination, the what ifs, how can I write this story? And then I have to make sure, especially since there aren't a whole lot of middle grade Hawaiian books out there, I want to make sure I'm representing everything correctly, because this could be some people's first exposure to some of the things I'm talking about. So I was really careful when writing about plants and animals. For example, I tried to use them to show place and time, because in the beginning of this story, I have it set in a modern day volcano that has introduced animals like the Minjiro and the cardinal and stuff like that, pigeons. But as she moves deeper into the forest and perhaps into a more native space, I start using a lot of the native, endemic, and even extinct honey creepers and different animals that used to be found in Hawaii but might not anymore. I also researched mammals and found out that Hawaii only has 2 native land mammals. And that was how I chose my sidekick, Ilikea. She's a bat, and it's a random thing to have, but the only other land mammal is the Hawaiian monk seal. And I couldn't imagine a monk seal trying to make its way up a volcano. So that it is. I researched holua sleds, because those are the things they use to go down the mountains. In Colorado, we have snow, and snowboards look one way. I couldn't figure out what Hawaiians would have used to sled because they don't have snow. So I ended up finding Uncle Tom Pohaku Stone is actually bringing back the art of holua. And he was kind enough to email me and answer some of my questions when I was doing research on that. So yes, lots of research. I found a book by Martha Beckwith on Hawaiian mythology that has so much stuff in it from back in the early 1900s that she kind of collected from kupuna and ancestors at that time. So I tried to get as close to the source as possible. But again, the language barrier is real because there are so many Hawaiian language newspapers out there that I don't have access to because I can't read them. So that was very, very frustrating because they used to tell all of their stories and capture all of their stories in the newspapers.
Wow.
I'm curious about, speaking of language, your book, what I love about it is it's just so, there's just so much Hawaiian terminologies in there, it's very confident using the actual terms and not the westernized or here's the translated terms. How was that in the editing process? How did you balance you're writing a middle grade book.
You don't even have a glossary at the end.
I don't. And that was a very conscious decision because I thought about all the books that I've read growing up where I didn't necessarily recognize a lot of the words or how to pronounce things, but those authors using those words never had to put in a glossary. So why should I have to, even though sorry, that was probably not the right choice, but I put it on my website. So now there's a pronunciation guide on my website. There's definitions on my website, but I really wanted that slight sense of discomfort for grownups who are reading it to have to take that extra step. I think for kids, they kind of breeze right through it, because when I pick up a book, especially when I was in middle school and I didn't know the words, I would just keep going and not really care. And either I'd learn it or I wouldn't. And I'd have this mispronunciation in my head for my whole life. And then as an adult, I'd be like, that's how you say that word. But I don't think it's awful for people to be a little uncomfortable or stretched or pushed to see new things. And I think for the kids who are familiar with these words, I've gotten feedback that it's just been awesome to see it in print for the first time. I had my Hawaiian language teacher go through and pronounce everything for the audio person, because even I'm not comfortable saying it all out loud all the time. So I was like, okay, Kumu, can you please read all these and record them for the audio folks? So that's, yeah, in the pronunciation guide, it's me, but in the audio, it's all pulled from my Kumu, my teacher.
I will say I definitely did have the experience of, okay, I don't really know how to pronounce this. I'm just going to like read it in my head and figure it out later. Someone will correct me probably.
Exactly. And that's fine, right? You don't have to know how to pronounce all the words. Game of Thrones, I can't pronounce half that stuff, but it's okay. I just keep going, like whatever. I read a lot of Spanish. Like it's kind of pronounced just like Spanish. We pronounce our vowels the same way. And I've seen a lot of Spanish, a lot more Spanish words being included in books. And I thought, if they can do that, like granted, there's a heck of a lot more Spanish speaking people here, but it's nice to see. I always enjoy it. I think it adds a great flavor and sense of culture in the story. So I am so excited that Penguin and Elizabeth Lee, my editor, were okay with pushing the boundaries a little bit in how we were going to tell this story.
I mean, it's good to push boundaries because as people who are part of the diaspora, we are uncomfortable almost all the time. So why shouldn't readers who are not part of the diaspora feel comfortable? Like, it's kind of like slipping into our shoes for the first time in a way. I'm curious as to, like, have your children read your books, since you say that they're very big Percy Jackson fans, and this book has been pitched towards readers who are a fan of that series?
So my daughter was already beyond these kinds of stories when it was finished. She's like Sarah J. Maas and that kind of stuff already.
No.
Oh, and yeah. Yup. It's a whole nother education over there. My son read, that stinker. He read to about, if you've read the book, he read to about the lava tube scene. And there was so much backstory that I had to explain, like, who Pele is and her role in the Hawaiian Islands, and give readers who maybe didn't grow up in Hawaii a sense of place and time. He got bored and he put it down because he already knows all that stuff, because I tell it to him all the time. He's like, Mom, I already know this book. I was like, no, just get through that beginning stuff, I promise. He's like, no, you tell me this all the time. And it's true, because I would tell him at the dinner table, oh, guess what I wrote today? And oh, guess what happens next? So yeah, no, they haven't.
It's good that they're like familiar with the folktales, because what if they weren't? I'm pretty sure it would have been a very different experience. They would have been like asking you so many questions, being like, who is this? Like, so how come you never told me about our culture? And you're showing us that you have, like, at least,
Yes.
not let that Hawaiian part of their heritage die.
Just go away. Yeah.
Nothing your parents do will ever be cool. So, like,
No.
I think you'll have to be happy with other kids enjoying what you write.
And the other kids get such a kick out of that, because it comes up pretty often, like, oh, why did you write these stories? I'm like, well, my son really loved Percy Jackson. Oh, does he love this book? I'm like, actually, he hasn't read it. But I bet he would. Yeah. Yep. And now he's older as well. And so I'm guessing they'll probably come back around to it when they're in their 20s and they're like, let's see what mom actually did. And they'll cry. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
I mean, the fact is still, unfortunately, books, even covering like Native Hawaiian and folklore is still very rare, especially in like the middle grade space, right? So
yes,
hopefully you won't still be one of the only ones there, but it's good that your book will be there.
There's plenty space. Everybody can come write more middle grade Hawaiian stories, write more YA Hawaiian stories. We need our voices out there for sure. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, because May is Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. I mean, that's such a mouthful.
All the words, all the letters.
All the letters. I'm just curious as to like what your thoughts are on the Native Hawaiian / Pacific Islander part of that descriptor, because I feel like when we see lists that are like, okay, these are books for APAM, you rarely see authors of Pacific Islander or Native Hawaiian descent. And we, as a podcast, like, we've made that mistake before. And we've tried really hard to be more inclusive. And we actually have like our own shelf of just Pacifica authors on our bookshop affiliate page. But it's just, I'm sure it's a difficult conversation that
all of us
you have to have.
Yeah, we have a good group of us Pacific Islanders in a Discord, and every May we all just kind of grit our teeth and hold on and try not to look too closely at lists because we don't want to inevitably be saddened, unfortunately. But some of my close friends have formed Pacific Islanders in Publishing for exactly this reason. So if you go to pacificislanderbooks.org, you will see all of the books published from picture book to adult, in poetry to nonfiction to everything across the board by Pacific Islanders. And what we also want to amplify is that Pacific Islanders are not just Polynesians. There's also Melanesians and Micronesians, and we don't want their voices to be drowned by just Hawaiians, for example. There are so many islands in the Pacific Ocean that we really want to make sure that all voices are kind of uplifted and celebrated. And it's so exciting to see a Hawaiian on the list, but it's even more exciting if you see like a Fijian on the list or somebody from one of the more underrepresented, if it's even possible to imagine being more underrepresented, but yes, from the other groups as well. So definitely go check out Pacific Islanders in Publishing. There is no reason to not have a Pacific Islander on a list for AAPI now that that resource is out there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it is pretty funny too that there are underrepresentation in an underrepresented group.
Right? My mom always said there's always going to be somebody like richer than you, and there's always going to be somebody poorer than you. There's always going to be somebody more represented. There's always going to be someone underrepresented. It's all relative.
Yeah, and the fact that we're already all lumped together in this very nebulous AAPI like umbrella, and
it's for 1 month only. And then you don't have to read
only
any other Asian books.
Usually for East Asians, and then it's like, okay, well. We're a big continent, so it's kind of weird that you guys are like just focusing on China and Japan and Korea. But
I mean, even my sister-in-law is Marshallese, and that's a people that are gonna, because the sea levels are rising, their homes not gonna be there in like a decade or two, right? Like there's literal cultures that might be in danger of just disappearing, right? And so I think it's cool that I can't say that we're doing better at, making sure these stories stay alive. But, I think especially diaspora people, like diaspora creators these days, are more interested in, learning even the oral histories of their own histories, right? Because we've mentioned it time and time again, like these are not stories that were taught growing up, right? Like history is not favorable to our stories.
And that's the thing. We had so much oral history that wasn't necessarily written down before. And that's what we're trying to really capture and tap into. And I think Hawaii did such a great job at preserving it through the printing press. We had the first printing press west of the Mississippi in Hawaii, and we just were prolific at producing all of these millions of pages of newspapers, but then the language is almost extinguished. So it's only been within the past few decades that folks have made it a priority to start translating and preserving what was in these newspapers, because the oral history only takes you back, or can only be remembered and saved so many ways. And those newspapers were definitely one of the ways.
Yeah. So like last year, there was a horrific fire in Maui, the Maui wildfires. And I noticed that you and several other authors banded together to launch a fundraiser for the families who are impacted by the fires. I'm curious as to like, how did the campaign start, and like what has it taught you about the book community?
Oh gosh, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that drama and chaos aside, the book community is the best community to be a part of, because it's like, yes, we have our infighting like any family, but when somebody from the outside needs help, or when somebody a part of our community needs help, I feel like we all jump together and band together to really come through. We raised over $200,000. I can't even remember the exact amount, 263, 275, something like that, $1,000 for the Lahaina or the Maui fire victims. It started, how did it start? I'm going to say it was Joanna Ho, of course.
Oh,
because
yeah.
she does everything and knows everyone, and she's friends with all of us too. And Kealani and Keala and Shar, Punky Aloha, and a few other folks were all like stunned, I think, when it happened, and overwhelmed and not sure how to act and how to process and how to move forward. And she just started reaching out to all of us. Hey, I just helped with this book drive for this other cause. I think we could do something here, but I need help. And all of us were like, well, we want to do it, but we can't do it on our own. So we formed this group of 6. There's also Erica and Teresa, and we all came together and asked for support and donations, and people came through, and it was amazing. And we were able to donate to some of the biggest organizations there to give them the money. And yeah, I can't believe how much folks were willing to give of their time and financially to help that place and help those people. It was great.
Yeah, this bookish community, like you said, we have our own dramas. Like, I mean, we cover those dramas on this show every month, and wow, they're crazy, they're bonkers. But it is a very generous community. I think it's because, especially if you are in a minority group, there's something really powerful in seeing yourself represented in literature, which has always kind of leaned towards white male readers. So it's like, yes, like if there is a cause that we can band behind, then they'll show up. And I think that's like that's something really beautiful and special about the book community.
Yeah, especially someplace like Hawaii, that I feel like everybody or so many people have a Hawaii story, and it's typically one of the highlights of their memories, like a honeymoon, a wedding, a family vacation. It makes a mark on people and leaves a lasting impression. So everybody wants to help give back to a place that has left them with so much.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So we're winding down to our end of the interview, and like you have the second book out, Leia and the Invisible Island. I'm curious, like, was that always part of the plan? Like, did you split like a manuscript in half to get the second book, or like do you already have like a series in the bag? Like, what's going on?
So writing Lay as my very first book was an experience, and I didn't know how it was going to end till I literally got to the end of the story and wrote those last pages, and I just didn't think I could leave it like that, because there's no way there's no way Pele would have left it so nice and neat. So I needed to have another way to end it. But everybody tells you when you're querying a book, you have to have it be standalone with the potential for a series. I was like, well, I don't know about a whole series, but I definitely have an idea for a book too. And so when I got an agent for the first time, they were like, okay, trilogies are a little harder to sell right now, but if you can pitch it as a duology, write a summary or a synopsis, like 1-page paper on what you think book 2 might entail. I was like, whoa, gosh, I don't have any idea other than he has to get this thing back that he lost. I don't actually know what they're going to do or where they're going to go. So that was a frantic little like weekend of dreaming up what I would love to have for a book 2, not even knowing if I could sell book 1 yet or not. But it sold in a 2-book deal. So I got Lay Fire Goddess and Lay Invisible Island sold. That was lovely. I have ideas for more, but those are not at all even a glimmer at this point. The publishers want to see how these 2 do before going to other islands, which I would love to do. So yeah,
That sounds lovely.
I'm taking a little break from the Lay universe right now and writing another story that, fingers crossed, it gets picked up. It has more Hawaiian lore in it, and this time it has a male main character trying to figure out how to control his impulses. I delve a little bit more into my ADHD part and raising of my son and trying to put those struggles onto the page.
Not just being a boy.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Yes.
Well, best of luck to your future endeavors. Looking forward to hearing that that publishing announcement any day now.
Yeah, that would be just super. Let's put all those good vibes out there, and in the meantime, I have YA ideas, and we'll just keep trying all the things, right?
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
Glad to have your book in the world, so that when people ask us, can you recommend some Native Hawaiian Islander books for our kids? Like, yeah, we have just the pick. So thank you.
Sure can. Yes, absolutely. And can I real fast do a little pitch for another Native Hawaiian middle grade book?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So Christiana Kahakawila recently, May 14th, Clairvoyance came out. So there are now 2 middle grade Hawaiian traditionally published authors in the big 4, big 5 realm. She was by HarperCollins publishers. So go check it out, Clairvoyance. And it's a funny little play on words because she becomes kind of ESP, telepathic abilities to read what boys are thinking.
Oh.
Yeah.
We've read Christina's book for this podcast. We read This Is Paradise, her short story collection.
Is it Christiana?
Yeah, Christiana.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Then yes, it's her. And now she has a middle grade.
She's a great writer. Yes.
It's so fun.
I don't know if you want to know what we're thinking. It's all
right. It's kind of a disaster. It's a disaster. She handles it very well, and she navigates the perils very well.
Yeah. Well, Malia, thank you so much for joining us on Books and Boba. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for having me, folks.
That she benefits from access to elite institutions. So the proximity to whiteness that she is granted in the U.S. is very much a function of caste. And that is something that she wouldn't have been positioned to even see. So, and she's also coming to the U.S. at a time when the sort of paternalism and charity of being a do-gooder is falling out of fashion, and it is something that is being replaced by a call for much more systemic change. And so she's just at an interesting moment when, what does it mean to be a thoughtful, decent person in the world, aware of your privilege, and also sometimes wanting to recognize that there are limits to that privilege too, as somebody from the global South and as somebody who has brown skin, living in, having proximity to whiteness, but also ultimately living in a very white world. I think my own personal experience in academia has been pretty rosy. I work in a really wonderful institution, which when you say that, University of Mississippi is this, like, I wouldn't say it's necessarily university-wide, always a bastion of progressive thought, but it is, but I have a department that is wonderful and smart and committed and rambunctious and interesting. And I have a really, really fortunate position within a landscape that I think for a lot of people of all backgrounds, but certainly people of color, certainly queer folks, certainly immigrants, is a complicated place. And so I, as in my own narrow experience, I can say that I love teaching. I love the department that I'm part of. I love the university that I'm part of. I love my students dearly. And I began my own career as a professor when the book was finished. So I could have made some changes, but really, like, the texture of Vega's life as an academic was written into the novel before I became an academic myself. But I think in a lot of ways, what she loves about teaching and she loves about being part of any university does reflect the things that I too love about it. That there's just a beauty to teaching students. There's a beauty to having them walk in the room and be part of the conversation that you're facilitating. It's a real privilege I think she's aware that it's a real privilege to do that. And I have felt the same way in my own experience.
Yeah. Well, your book just came out earlier this month. How has it been seeing it out in the world?
It's so wild. I mean, I'm in Boston right now and giving a reading this evening at Brookline Booksmith. And I walked in and it was just there. It was just a book among books. And, like, that's wild. It's such a joy to see it up there. And it is something, like, it is such a gift to write something that people consume for pleasure and thought and connection, human connection to themselves, connection to others. And I cannot believe that I've had the opportunity to do that. I'm still over the moon. If you ask me in 10 years, I might still be riding this high. So I don't know if it's just the moment or like the feeling of publishing, but yeah.
Well, congratulations for reaching your dream. Are you up for doing it again, or are you going to take a little break for now?
No, I'm into book 2, and it is I'm loving it so far. I can say that it is unless something significant changes. I guess what I can commit to saying about it is that it's a story of a diplomatic family in the early aughts and spanning about 15 years.
Well, Sheila, thank you so much for joining us on Books and Boba, and congrats on your book launch.
Thank you, Marvin and Rira, so much.
And that was our conversation with Malia Maunakea. Both her novels, Lay and the Fire Goddess and Lay and the Invisible Island, are available now at booksellers everywhere. And you can also pick them up on the Books and Boba bookstore. So head on over to booksandboba.com and click on the bookshop link. Book purchases that you make online support not only the Books and Boba podcast, but also your local bookstores. Before we go, Rira, can you remind us what we are reading for book club for June 2024?
Yeah, sure. We are reading Greta and Valden by Rebecca K. Riley, and it has been pitched as Schitt's Creek meets Sally Rooney's Normal People, and it is an international bestseller that follows a brother and sister as they navigate queerness, multiracial identity, and the dramas big and small of their entangled, unconventional family, all while flailing their way to love. So lots of messy drama going on in this book, and you know how much we love drama on this show.
Yeah. And as always, if you finish reading the book and have thoughts to share, please let us know on Goodreads or on Discord, where we're also reading along live with our book club members. We always love to hear what you think about our book club picks, as well as include your feedback in our discussion episodes whenever possible. But with that, that'll do it for this episode of Books and Boba. Thank you so much to Malia Maunakea for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Hey, Sharon.
Hey, Ramen.
How are folks still racist?
I know, right? We're like 2 decades into the 21st century.
Yeah, and second question, where's my jetpack?
Well, I can't help you there, but have I got a podcast for you. Modern Minorities is a show where each week my longtime pal Ramen and I uncover common and uncommon truths that we all need to hear for our majority brains and ears.
Yeah, Sharon and I have spoken to doctors, lawyers, directors, climate activists, angry Asians, athletes, chefs, writers.
Folks who are Black, brown, gay, straight, and everything in between.
Past guests have included comedian Margaret Cho, Southern Poverty Law Center journalist Geraldine Mariba, comics creator Jean Lun Yang, and many, many more.
We've even talked about Ramadan, Black History Month, Kamala Khan, and Robin being queer.
It's like we're trying to solve racism with the podcast.
Challenge accepted.
So check out Modern Minorities at modmypod.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Remember, we're all modern minorities, but we're no one's model minority.